Hi everyone, welcome back to another lecture of Intro to iOS Development. Today we'll be going over the second part of networking. But before we get started, just want to highlight another amazing submission. So this one is from David. This is a collection view of all these elements. So when you click on an element, you can see details about this element. You can filter, and then also you can reverse the order of the elements. So now it goes from descending order, and if you click this again, it goes from ascending order. So we thought the UI of this app was very good, and also it just looked really nice. So great job, David.
Also, he had a search thing.
Oh yes, you could also search for an element by either the number, so one is hydrogen, or the name, so hydrogen.
Yeah, good job, David.
Okay, so before we get into today's lecture, we're going to do a little bit of review. So which of the following is not a type of HTTP request? Yes. Yeah. So create is not a type of HTTP request. If you wanted to create something, you would use a post request, and post request can also be used to update data. Get request is used to retrieve or get data from the server, and delete is used to tell the server to delete a model. Next question is, what is JSON? If no one knows which one is JSON, can anyone tell me which one is definitely not JSON? Did someone say something? Are you saying is A JSON or A is not a JSON? Not what a JSON is. No, it's not correct. Very close though. Yes. Yeah, so a JSON is a dictionary with key value pairs. If you remember, just for reference, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So it's a format for storing and transporting data to and from the server, and your keys are always strings in this dictionary, and your values can be strings, objects, numbers, booleans, arrays, or null. And so this is an example of a JSON where the keys are name, number, and instructors. Name and number are their values are strings and numbers, and instructors, the value is an array of instructor objects with names and IDs as their keys, and like the values are also strings. So now we're going to talk a little bit about closures again. If you remember, closures are self-contained blocks of functionality that can be passed around and used in your code. Self-contained means that the closure is meant to perform its action within the scope of the code, and passed around means that you can take in a closure as input to a function. So basically, they're functions that aren't formally defined, and if you know other languages, they're basically like anonymous functions in other languages. This is an example of a closure. Instead of defining a function to add two numbers, you can also define a closure. This closure takes in two integer inputs, and we name them first and second, and we return the sum of first and second. So then you would call it with let closure 3 equals add two numbers closure. You can also use closures for higher order functions, map, filter, and sort. So this example is an example of using map to map an array of integers to booleans. In this closure, what you do is the closure map takes in a number from the array, and it'll map it into a boolean based on this whatever we define in there. And what we define right now is that it'll return true. So map it to true if number is greater than or equal to 0, and false otherwise. So then this map list becomes false, true, 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 and false. So map is basically a function for how you can get from an array of objects B to an array of objects A. And this closure defines how you convert each element into the bool. So closures are also used in networking, which we covered a little bit about last lecture. So this is an example of a function to get classes. And so getting a response from the server takes time, and we don't want our application to stop and wait for a response. So instead of waiting, the application runs the closure block. So in this block of code, we see Alamofire, which is a pod that we use for networking in this course, and we use their request function. And we pass into this request function the endpoint and the method. So in this case, we're using .get because we want to get classes, but you can also use post and delete. we validate the response, and then when the response is received, we switch on the response and check if it was a success or a failure. And if it's a success, I think last lecture we just printed the JSON, but in this case, we're also using a closure that we call completion. So after we get a response, and we'll decode our JSON into like a Swift model object that we can use and manipulate in our Swift code, we want to run some code to, like, say, for example, update a table view, right? So therefore, we have this closure that we call completion, which will be the function that gets called with our updated course array. And notice that this completion closure has an @escaping keyword. So a closure is set to escape a function when it is a parameter to a function, and it's called after the function returns. So we don't want this function where we make this networking request to get our courses to stop our app. So what we do is instead we pass in the data into a closure so that afterwards this function can go running on in the background, and when this when the courses are finally like received and decoded, we can pass it into our completion, and the completion will handle the action with the courses, so like updating the table view and reloading the data. Does anyone have any questions at this point? Okay, so next we'll go into a little bit of review about networking. So networking is used to retrieve, update, delete, or add data. So getting information of all the posts in a feed, so this is like any social media app, this would be like a GET request. So like, Twitter, when you get all your tweets, or Facebook, you get all your posts. Logging in and authenticating a user is also a networking request. It would probably be a post request, so you have to pass in, say, like your username and your password, and then your networking request would check it against the data in the database. Deleting a song from a playlist is also a networking request. In this case, it would be a delete request. So instead of hard coding data, we just write networking code to store, update, delete information from a database. And this just makes our app like a lot nicer and more scalable. So sometimes you need to pass in information into networking requests. For example, if you're searching something on Google, you're searching like, say, dogs, like Google, like when it makes a networking request, it needs to know what you're searching for. Or like signing up for an account as a new user, the networking request needs to know what your new username and your password is. Or logging in, it needs to know like what is your username and what is your password to check it against the value that it has in the database. So there's two methods to encode data. So there's either URL encoding, which is common for GET requests. If you notice, whenever you search something on Google, it'll have like the URL and then also a question mark and a Q equals some value. So if you search dogs, it'll say like Q equals dogs. So this is like URL encoding for GET requests. There's also JSON encoding, which is common for POST requests. So you pass in information like as a JSON. So in this case, this JSON says username is Mike and the password is that password. Does anyone have any questions at this point? So now we're going to go into a little side note about API. So API stands for Application Programming Interface. It's sort of like a menu, so you contain the operations that an application can use to interact with another application. For example, Google has the Calendar API, which lists all of the HTTP requests that you can make to their server. So with the Calendar API, for example, you could use it in your app to add events to Google Calendar from your application. For example, if your app somehow, for some reason, is like a scheduling app, like you want to schedule something with your friends, then you can use this API in your app to add this event to all your friends, like Google Calendar or something like that. So the last part is decoding server responses. So you make a request to a server. So in this case, you want to get the classes. But then now when you get the response, like you want to like somehow handle this response and make it into an array, like a form of data that you can manipulate in Swift. So in last lecture, we noticed that the data we got back was like this JSON with key data and value, this array of classes. So each class has a name, a code, instructor, and enrolled. But you can't really like manipulate this in Swift. Like this is not really like a Swift object or anything like that. So how do we convert or decode our JSON to model objects? The way we do this is we want to decode the JSON into an array of course objects. So on the right, we define this struct called course. And if you notice, the course looks a lot like each object in the classes array for the classes key in this JSON. And this course has a name, a code, instructor, and a Boolean indicating whether or not someone is enrolled. So if this is too hard to think about, like decoding this entire array, we can also think about decoding like a simpler response, so just one object in this array. So then you can see like it's easily translatable that this object on the left in the JSON form is equal to the object on the right. So the way we want to decode it is we're going to use Swift's JSON decoder to convert this JSON into a course object. And the way we do this is by conforming to the codable protocol. When we conform to the codable protocol, we also conform to decodable and encodable, right? And we conform to decodable to decode this response into the Swift object, and also encodable because when we do something with our data and we want to make a post request, we want to encode it so that the server can receive this request. So we just conform to the codable protocol, and we notice that the field names and types match exactly. So you have to make sure that everything matches exactly, or else it won't work. For example, if I had named in my struct course, if I did var names, it wouldn't work. Or if I said the type of name was integer, it also wouldn't work. So now Haiying is going to go into the demo for today.
Hello. So today, what we're gonna demo is so we have this so on fun we're getting this list of courses from the internet. So what we want is we want to display this data on our app. So we can look at it cleaner with a JSON formatter. So basically, if you want to get the list of courses, you see there's like a success that's true, and then you have a data. And data is a list of courses that you have. And each course, you can see like each course has an ID, a code, a name, the assignments, and then in the assignment is like a list. And then each assignment has an ID, title, due date, and yeah, so what we want today is display the list of classes, and we also want to be able to add classes to the server, and also for each class we also want to show their assignments. Does that make sense? Okay, yeah, so that's what we're going to be demoing today. Okay, we can go into our starter code. So here, let me pull up so basically there's a view controller here, and it contains a table view. That's where we're gonna show all our courses. And there's also an add button here that brings you to another page where you can add a course. So you can input the code and the name of the course and then add the course, and that should also add the course to the server. And yeah, so first thing we want to do is show the list of courses that we see from the internet. So like here, we want to be able to get all of these courses first. The first thing we're going to do is go into the course file, and we want to make some changes to this course file. Does anyone have an idea of what I should change? If, for example, like this struct course, how should I change it so we can so when we get the result from when we get the response from the server, it's going to be in a JSON form, but we want to make it map it into this struct class. But we have to change something here. Does anyone know what I should do? Yeah, so we should make it conform to codable. So, and then we also have to change that for assignment. So you can see here for each course, right? Like the mapping has to be exact. For a course, we have ID, and we have name, we have code, and then we have name, and then assignment, right? Assignment is a list of assignment, and for each assignment, here you can see there's there has to be an ID, a title, and a due date. Yes. The order doesn't matter, but it's just like the name has to be exact. Well, here I said due date. Well, technically, here it's an underscore due date, but here I made it camel cased. Technically, right at this moment, if you do this and make it camel case, it's not actually gonna work. So I'm just gonna make it snake case for now, and then later there's a trick you can do to keep it camel case, but we'll get back to that. So you can see the response we get here. It's not that we're gonna get a course, but you can see that it has a success. There's first a success, and then there's a data, and the data is the list of course. So we also have to create a class that's gonna map to the success and the data. So I'm gonna add a new class. Let me make it bigger. Is that big enough? So I'm gonna call it courses response, and of course we have to conform it to Codable, and then it's gonna have a boolean called success, and it's a boolean, right? Because you can see success is just true or false, and then we also have a data, and then this data here is just a list of courses. So that's the type of it. It's gonna be course. Oops. What's this arrow? Okay, and the next. Okay, so yeah, we actually have this mapping exactly here for the courses response. And the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna actually get that information from the internet. So we're gonna go into our network manager, and then we're gonna first edit this get courses function, where we're gonna get all the courses from this endpoint. So first we have to remember how Amy talked about adding a escaping closure. So we're gonna, as a parameter, so we're gonna do that first. So we're gonna add a completion function that's gonna be a closure. Oh my god, it's escaping. Sorry, it's enough. And then what's that's gonna give you is you're gonna have the list of courses, and then that's gonna return a void. So what this is doing is you're gonna pass in this completion function, and it's gonna be what you want, how you want to handle the list of courses that you're gonna get from the internet. Does that make sense? It might make more sense like when we finish implementing this. So last week we talked about how we can use Elmo-Fire to make requests. So we're gonna use that. So what you do is you do af.request, and then we're gonna use this one. So the first thing is the first parameter you have to pass in is the endpoint. So we're gonna just pass in the endpoint, and then the method, since we're just getting all the courses, the method is just gonna be a get request, and then we don't need all the other things for this. So we just need to have the endpoint and then the method. And then what we do next is we have to validate the response that we get. And then last week we used the response JSON, and then what response JSON does is it's gonna give you your response in a JSON form. But a more flexible thing you can use is response data, and data could be like anything. It could be like a JSON, or it could be just an image. So we're gonna use response data here just for the flexibility that it gives you. And then so this is also a closure, right? And then the parameter we're gonna get from this is we just call it response. So that's the response you get from the from that endpoint. And then we want to do what we need to with the response we get. Since response is an enum, so we're gonna well, actually response is not an enum. The response result is the enum, so we have to switch the response result. And then so it could be a success, and then with success it's gonna give you some data, so I'm gonna call it data. And then there's another case where it's fail. If it failed, that's gonna give you an error. So same thing as what we did last week. If it's a failure, I'm just gonna print out the error. And then for success, right, we're that means we successfully got the data that we need, and this data right now is in this JSON form, right? And then we want to map that JSON into the courses. So what we're gonna use is this thing called that Amy mentioned before. It's gonna be JSON decoder. That's built in Swift. So I'm just gonna call make a JSON decoder, and then so next thing is we're gonna try to decode that JSON into this course response struct. So what we can do is we can if like course response. Sorry, I'm like typing really bad. So we want to try, and try is just you just try if it to see if it works. And then you're gonna use this JSON decoder that we defined before, and then we call JSON decoder.decode. And then we're gonna use this first thing. So the type, what you pass in for the type here they ask for is what you want this JSON to be decoded into. So what we want is we want it to be decoded into course response, right? Because that's what our JSON, the format of our JSON. So we're gonna, let me see where it is. So the type here, we want to use course response.self. And then the second parameter is from a data that you were using to decode. So we can just pass in the data here. And then we're using an if flag here because we're using a try. So we're trying to see if it can be decoded. So if if it successfully decodes, then it's gonna be assigned to this course response variable. And then now we have the course response. We want to get the list of courses. So we can let course equal to course response dot data, right? Because course response data is the list of courses that we need. So now we have courses. So now we have all the courses. We are going to pass that into this completion handler. So we have to call completion courses. So what's going to happen is once it successfully decodes the JSON that we get, it's going to get the courses from the course response data, and then it's going to call this completion courses. So that's and then whenever you call get courses, you have to pass in this what you want it to do with the courses that you get from this response. So now we're gonna actually call get courses somewhere. So in view controller, if you go to this function, I have this function get courses. This is called whenever view did load. So after you set up all your view, it calls get courses. So here what you want to do is we want to make a call to this get courses function. So you do network manager.get courses, and then you see that this get courses, right, expects a function that's passed into the completion argument, and you can pass in it expects a function, right? So we can just use a closure to pass it in. So this closure is going to be you will have all the courses that you get. So that this is the courses that's here. Let me see here. So completion, right? We pass in these courses into this function. So this is the courses that we got from the server. And then what we want to do with the courses is in this view controller, there's a variable for the courses, and this courses variable is what gets displayed in the table view. So you can see like here, we're using courses.count and then configuring for each course. So what we want to do here is setting the self.courses equal to courses. So self.courses is the courses here, and then this courses is what we got from the server. And then after that, we want to update the table view, right? Because our courses changed, right? So how would you update the table view? Can someone tell me? With the courses, new courses you have? Yeah. Yeah, so you would do table view. Table view. Well, this table view is called course table view dot reload data. And then another thing you had to do is when you reload data, you're updating the UI, and whenever you're using a closure and you're updating the UI, you have to update it on the main thread. So what you have to do is called dispatch queue.main.async. So this is just something you have to do because updating the UI should be done on the main thread. So it just has to do with threading. But if you want to know like why you actually have to do that, you could like read more on it. But we're not gonna go into detail here. And then you also have to add a self here because it's gonna complain that within a closure you have to use a self if you want to reference something in the class. And it has to do with this thing called retain cycle. But I'm not gonna go into too much detail about that here. But yeah, so we can try this. Let me run it. Oh, something failed. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Actually, I forgot to make a change here. So before, how I said the due date here right now it's in snake case, but the convention for Swift is to use a camel case, right? So we want to be able to use camel case for due date, but since the response from the server is gonna be in snake case, it's not gonna work. But we can do something with the JSON decoder to make it work. So what you can do is you have to set the JSON decoder's key decoding strategy to convert from snake case. So what that's gonna do is it's gonna take in the snake case from the server and convert it, the snake case we have here, and convert it into camel case. Does that make sense? Yeah. So then now for course we can actually use camel case here. Right, so now this table view displays the classes that we have from the server. So we had a class called for intro to iOS, and then we had a class for algo. So this is all what we got from this endpoint. Does anyone have questions on this? just to reiterate, so in view controller, right, the network manager's get courses expects a completion that passes in a function, right? And this function is what you want. The idea is this function is gonna be what happens when the response completes. So that's why we call it completion. So what happens after the you get the courses is we're gonna update the table view, and that gets passed into this function get courses. So whenever we finish getting the response from the server, like here, we're gonna call completion courses. So that this part gets called, and then you can update the table view. Does that make sense? And also to emphasize like why we use at escaping. The reason why we could have just used a regular closure like this, but the problem here is if you don't use at escaping, the UI is gonna freeze and it's gonna wait for the response to be finished before it calls completion courses. So this is bad, right? Because you have to wait for the response to come back from the internet, and that could be slow. But with the escaping keyword, the completion is gonna be it's like escaping this function. It doesn't have to be so what escaping means is it can live outside this function. So whenever this function actually finishes running, the completion is called. So it's not, you don't call it in like the regular function order where you like after you get the response you call completion. It can be called after you get the response and then you'll update the UI. Does that make sense? So the whole point of using escaping is we don't want to freeze the app whenever we wait for a response. So it can just kind of run in the background. And the next thing we want to do in this demo is whenever you click is to add like a course. So that's making like a post request to the endpoint. So you can enter like a code and then the name, and then it should add the course to courses. And the endpoint for that is let me show you. So there's this endpoint. Also this application is a Postman where you can use to like make, because with GET requests you can just like type in the URL on the on your browser, and then you can, that's like making a GET request. But with POST requests you can't really do that on the browser. So what you have to do, so you can use this app called Postman and like make the request. So here this is a post request, and then the URL is just this the host name and API courses. So this is the URL. And what you want to send some data to the server, right? And for the course we expect a code and a name. And it's sending that in JSON form. So this is called a request body. So this is what we are sending together in the post request. This is what we're gonna send to the server. Right? Does that make sense? So this is the information we want to send to the server, and we're gonna get that from whatever the user input. Does that make sense? Like how you're making a post request and there's like a request body you have to send? Okay. So we're gonna actually implement that. Same thing here. We'll need a completion and at escaping. And then now the response we get is not a list of course. If you see here, if you see here, whenever you make a post request, the data here is not a list of course anymore, right? It's just one course that you added. So we actually had to make another mapping to reflect this. So in the course file, I'm gonna add another struct that's called course response, and then conform that to codable. You have a success, and then here the data is just gonna be one course, since right, we only have one course here instead of a list of courses. And then in the network manager, when we say what's like the thing that we get from the response, it's not gonna be a list of course anymore. It's just gonna be one course, right? I don't think I mentioned that before, but it's void because we're not returning anything from this closure. And then same thing, af.request. And then the endpoint is, so we have an endpoint, but you can see like there's this, it's not just the host anymore. You also have like a API course thing at the end. So I'm just gonna add that in. So you can use this, use the string interpolation thing to make the string that attaches the API course. And then for method, we're gonna use .post, right? So this is something different, right? Before we're making a GET request, but now we're actually making a POST request. And then parameter, we actually want to add some parameter into this, and the parameters are just our request body, so the code and the name that we want. Yeah. Well, sorry?
In Postman, the URL is like courses.
Oh, good catch. Yeah, it's courses. Good catch. You must be familiar with this. And so we want to pass in some parameters, right? And this is the code and the name. So we will also need to pass in the code and the name we get in this function, because whenever we call, we have to know what code and name was inputted in the text field here, right? So I'm gonna add a code. It's a string, and name. That's also a string. So we can build our parameters. So I'm gonna make a variable called parameters, and I'm gonna put that in the so it will have type string to a string. So this is how you define a dictionary in Swift, right? Because what we're kind of passing in is kind of like dictionary into the parameter. So this dictionary is gonna have a code. It's gonna have a code, and then that. So the code is the key, right? The key, like the key here. And this code is what we pass in into the as one of the parameter of the function. And then you also need name. And then now you have these parameters you can pass in into here. And another thing we need to add is how we're gonna the encoder is how we're gonna encode this parameter. So right now this parameter is in Swift's dictionary, right? But we want it to be encoded as a JSON when we pass when we make this request, because the endpoint expects you to pass in a JSON as the request body. So The way we do that is you say JSON, I think JSON encoding, sorry, I forgot the exact. I think it's, oh yeah, JSON encoding dot default. So that's just you're encoding this dictionary in Swift into a JSON. And then we don't need the rest. Does this how this request is formatted make sense? You're making a post request to this endpoint, passing in these parameters encoded as a JSON, right? And then we're gonna do the same thing. Dot validate dot response data. So we get the response, and then we will switch on response result. So failure, we're just gonna print out the error. Let me see. Oh, there's something wrong here. Let me see. I think. Sorry. Huh. Oh, wait, did I spell this wrong? No. I think it should be JSON decoding.default. See the error here? Is it the, oh wait, encoding. Oh wait, not the encoder, it's the encoding. So encoder we expect an encoder, but we're just doing encoding. So, sorry, this is just like mixed up with the names. Okay, now if it's a success, then we have our data, right? And our data is gonna be in the form of course response. So we have to do the same thing we did here. Let JSON decoder and then we're gonna have a course response. Oh, we're gonna try. So here, the struct that we wanted to decode into is gonna be course response self, and it's gonna be from the data. So it's the same thing. And then we're gonna get the course from the course response dot data, and then we're gonna have again a completion for the course. So then now we're gonna go into where we can call this add course functions. That's in the add course view controller. So if you go to add course view controller, we have a button to add, and then it's gonna call on this add tab. So here we can, so this is called whenever you tap on the add button, right? So here we can call on the add course function. We expect a code and a name, right? So here I just make sure that I just unwrapped the text from the code text field and assign that as code, and the same thing for the name, and then I make sure that code and name are not empty strings. So yeah, so for add course, we're going to pass in the code here and name from here, and then completion. So we're going to So this is what we want it to run when we get a course, right? So I'm here for here, I'm just gonna print the course. So what happens is when I click add, it's gonna make this network call to get to add course, and when I get the course back, I'm printing out the course here. Does that make sense? Oh no, low battery. Hope. Okay. So code, let's say CS 1110 Python. Let's click add. So yeah, it printed out, right? It printed out the course I added. And then I made this in this view controller. I added this refresh thing, so I can refresh, and you can see like Python is added. And if you're curious, the refresh thing is just whenever I refresh, I call get courses again. Oops. Yeah. So, oh, it's not ending, but I missed something there, but it's okay. So next thing I want to do is whenever you click on a course, oh no, let me rerun it. Whenever you click on a course, you want to show like, oh never mind, I didn't implement the thick select yet. I want to show like the assignments for that class. So let's see. Oh, not here, sorry. So what we want to do next is implement the get course by ID, right? So I'm gonna just use Postman here. So if we make a GET request to courses, adding in the ID for the course, that's gonna give you information for that specific course, and you'll see like there's like the assignments. So the same thing we're gonna do passing a completion. And then for here you only gonna get one course. So we're gonna make a request. Sorry, I just need to charge my laptop in case it dies in the middle of the lecture. Oh, where is the outlet? Okay. Wow. There's no outlet here. Okay. Well, hopefully we can finish it at 9%. But here the endpoint is gonna be API courses. So we want to know which ID for a course you want to get, right? So that's gonna be we're gonna pass that as an int into this function, and passing in the ID. It's gonna be a GET request. Yeah. Yeah.
Another backslash after that.
Oh yeah, thank you, catching that. Validate, same thing. Response data. Okay, I'm just gonna copy paste here since it's the same thing. Because both response gets you one course, so it's gonna be the same thing. And then where we're gonna get course by ID is in view controller. Whenever you select on a row, it's gonna get the course by that ID, and then it's gonna display this course detail view controller, which is initialized with a course, and then it's gonna display. It has a table view for the assignments. Wait, let me see, view controller. So here, right? And the selected row is just whatever you selected on the course at that index path. So we're gonna make a network manager dot get course by ID, and the ID is gonna be the course you selected on's ID. And then whenever we get the course, we want to push that view controller. So we're gonna do navigation controller dot push view controller, and this is gonna be the course detail view controller. And we're gonna pass in the course we get from the server, and then animate it true. Oh, oops. Oh yeah, and here we need the self. Since inside a closure, you need to say self. Oh, thank you. So now whenever we click on, okay, something's wrong here. Let me see if it's getting the course correct. Is my endpoint right? API courses. Let me see. I hope my server didn't die. Okay. Yeah. My endpoint is right? Well, wait, let me print it out to make sure I'm getting the course. Did it make a request? Oh, okay. Why is it not working for this one? I think I changed it though. Yeah.
No, but you didn't set the encoding key.
Oh, okay. Good call. The reason why it didn't work is I forgot to set the convert from snake case here, cause the assignment, right, has for each for when we get the response, the due date is still in snake case, right? So we had to make sure we convert from snake case. Let me run that again. Yeah, so now when you select on it, you can see the list of assignments. Yeah, remember to do that if your backend has a snake case, but you want to make it camel case. Does anyone have any questions on this? No? Okay, great. And then this is it for the demo. And then some action item is stay if for the hack challenge kickoff happening right after this. And then there's gonna be an assignment, project 7 due this Sunday. Yes.